places advertised. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd please stand and join us in reciting our Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. We have Councilor Forsman, who is participating remotely tonight. So, Councilor, can you hear us okay? We can hear you. Thank you. Okay, our next order of business is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the council on agenda items or other items they wish to bring to the attention of the council. Citizens are encouraged to discuss operational issues and advance with the mayor. In consideration of others wishing to speak, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Are there any citizen comments tonight? Please step forward to the microphone. We just need your name and city of residence. We don't need your physical address. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Nathaniel Tucker. I live in Lewiston, Idaho on Main Street. I sent this email today to Shannon Grow and Mr. Plaxton, as well as...
Nathaniel, you're going to have to get right on top of that thing, and folks at home are going to hear what you have to say.
All right. So I sent this to Plaxton, Grow, and you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Nathaniel Tucker. I live at 326 Main Street in Lewiston. And I've lived above the Blue Lantern for 18 years. My wife and I have lived downtown. I've lived downtown for 18 years. My wife has lived downtown for 16. My sister-in-law lives in the Moxie building across the street for a combined 5 years. I'm here to talk about our first order of business today, which is parking. And so I know that is that our first order of business? Since the reinstatement of the parking fines for parking overnight from 2 to 5 p.m. on Main Street, I hope you're all aware of that. My household, myself and my wife, have paid more than $300 to the city for this. My wife works for the Clarkson School District, and she leaves at 4:45 in the morning every weekday. So does my sister-in-law, who lives across the street at the Moxie building. Each are required to park either on D Street, 4th Street, that's that tiny little street, or in the municipal lots on the west side of the library. No other vehicles are allowed there, and I have personally counted 16 vehicles being ticketed in one night for a total of $400 for use of that space. Almost all of those had an LCSE parking sticker in their front window denoting that they are LCSE students. So just to be clear, LCSE students parking in the municipal lot just out here on the west side of the library were ticketed in one day, overnight. With the homeless population, so I have a couple... With the homeless population and other transients that tend to come out in the early morning, more than once, my wife and my sister-in-law have had to call each other because someone is yelling in the streets, pacing in front of one of the two buildings, or sitting on the bench maybe down at Bojack's and watching them. Either they wait for the threat to leave, or they try to coordinate walking together to their car. Now, they have to leave from Main Street, walk to the municipal lots, 4th Street, or find their way over to D Street. Okay? There are 3 parts to my objection to this practice of fining downtown residents. I see this as a safety issue for residents of Main Street and a detriment to the city's desire to encourage downtown residency. And 3 is building the downtown economy. To my first point, I would like to poll all the women in the area, in this group, as to whether they, when they leave work in the evenings, if they go by themselves to their vehicles, or if they go in groups to their vehicles for safety. So I just want you to think about that as part of how you operate during the daytime, as opposed to leaving at 4:30 in the morning to get to your vehicle. So my wife and my sister-in-law are unable to do this because of their schedule. They must walk by themselves to their cars in the early morning when no one else is around, except for our transient population, which is scary. This is a major safety issue. To my second point.
Daniel, I need to ask you to go a little bit quicker.
Okay, thank you. To my second point, downtown residency has been a focal point for our city, encouraging growth with the apartments above Domino's and at Town Square. The city and local businesses are rightfully discouraged from the lack of parking due to LCSC's dorm on Main Street. This should not be a city problem, but an LCSC problem. If the city were to require LCSC to provide parking for their students, this would not be an issue. In fact, on inspection of the city code, LCSC is required to provide parking. Section 37149, college or universities must provide one space per 2 students, plus 1 space per employee shift. So LCSC has not provided that sort of parking for downtown. I understand that this is difficult for our downtown businesses, but that's an LCSC problem, not a Lewiston City problem. We should be enforcing that. Finally, by essentially punishing permanent downtown residents with these fines, it discourages residency, which means fewer people shopping downtown. I propose, now this is my proposal and I'll finish. Here's that sticker that you can get if you want to park in this lot over here on next to the library. They issue these to downtown residents. We do not have a sticker that says you can park on Main Street overnight. My proposal is that if we were able to provide or allow application to receive something like this, to be able to park overnight on Main Street for those residents, so that they do not have, mainly for the city or for safety issues, secondarily for long-term residents, and third, why punish our downtown residents? I think that's the gist of my deal. Being able to provide something like this that a downtown resident could apply for, that they could park on Main Street overnight in front of the building that they live in and have lived in for more than 18 years or 16 years or even 5 years, would be helpful for a safety issue, and
Okay.
other things. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nathaniel, for being here tonight. And Nathaniel has stopped by to visit with me at City Hall too. And I think he has some interesting ideas to listen to. So, but thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Then I see an email. Did every counselor get a copy of this email? I don't know who brought it up here. Okay. So counselors, you have another email that was placed at your desk tonight. You can read. We won't read that out loud. I don't see any other citizen comments tonight, so we will move on to Roman numeral 4, public hearings and related action items. Item A, public hearing for ZA-05-2024, accepting testimony in zoning code amendment ZA-05-2024 to reduce the minimum number of parking spaces required and to establish a maximum number of parking spaces allowed for existing and new developments. This is an action item, and we have our assistant city planner with us, Ms. Katie Hollingshead. Welcome, Katie.
Good evening, councilors, Mr. Mayor.
I guess I better finish what I'm saying. I apologize.
You're fine.
The process is I will open the public hearing. We'll have a staff presentation from Ms. Hollingshead. We'll receive any testimony from the public. Councilors, you'll have time to ask questions. At that point, there'll be no additional evidence or testimony received once the public hearing is closed. So again, that is the time to ask questions. Then we will close the public hearing. So I will open the public hearing and turn it over to Ms. Hollingshead. Thank you. Welcome, Katie.
Katie Hollingshead, Assistant City Planner. So this first one is DA 05-2024. This is for ordinance 4939. So included in the packet, I don't have a visual presentation because this is more just words. Included in the packet is some background information. So last summer, the city completed an 18-month rewrite of our comprehensive plan. And as part of that comprehensive plan rewrite, an action plan was developed by consultants, steering committee, staff, public input, etc. So as part of that action plan, we have formed a comprehensive plan work plan committee that does include a couple members of council, some Councilor Schroeder and Councilor Klein and the mayor are on that, along with a couple of our planning and zoning commissioners, and they meet fairly regularly to talk about different items in city code that could possibly be amended to streamline, to improve, to try to accomplish some of these action plan items. So this revision of our parking code is one of those such items. So in front of you is a proposal underneath ordinance 4939 to reduce the minimum parking standards by half. So what exists currently in the code for a variety of different uses or building types or business types that language would all remain, and the code would just change to half of this is what is required. And so that would be, your minimum would be reduced by half. It would still have a maximum under what is currently listed. And then there is, in different sorts of uses, there is overflow parking regulations. So if someone wanted to go above and beyond what the required, that maximum is, they would be able to utilize that overflow parking regulation to be able to provide more parking if they thought it was necessary for the type of business or building that they were having. So that is what is in front of you guys tonight. It's pretty simple. The committee discussed this at length. We looked at a couple other communities. Parking regulation is one that's kind of a hot topic right now. And some communities are choosing to do away with it entirely. The committee did not think that was necessarily appropriate for the city of Lewiston, and that doing the half, the 50% of the current requirement, was probably a better starting point. We see how that goes. We see if that is encouraging to businesses to occupy buildings that maybe they wouldn't have been able to occupy previously because of a density in use and an amount of parking that would be required. So we're hoping that will spur some redevelopment of existing structures. That I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Katie. Let's see if there's any comments from the public testimony. Is there anyone here from the public to testify? Okay, I don't see anyone. So,
Mr. Mayor.
councilors?
You gotta come up in.
Nathaniel Tucker, Lewiston, Idaho. Real quick, this is for businesses only or
For all parking.
for all parking regulations? So that would include the LCSC parking,
Yes, any sort of off-street parking.
any sort of off-street parking. Thank you.
Councilors, questions? Councilor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you, Mayor. So Katie, in that, I was trying to follow it in the write-up. So there's a difference between the central business district and all other, correct?
Yes, so our central business district is a specific area through our downtown corridor that does not require off-street parking for certain business types.
So it doesn't increase their parking. It doesn't require off-street parking.
It just does, yeah, in the central business district, if you have certain business types and there, it's listed in that first section of the code that talks about if you're between this area and this area, you're located in that central business district. It does not require any off-street parking for those business types within that specific area.
Okay.
Counselor Wright?
Yes. So when I was reading through this, at first, I thought, this doesn't make any sense. Won't that mean just more people will park on the street? And at first, I thought it was all around town as well. And that was the idea I got. Well, if we don't have enough parking, even for the employees, then we're really going to have people parking on the streets. But as I read into it more, this being that specific downtown area that's
So
the
this is for all of the
FID.
city. This is for all of the city. So it's
This
not
is-
just for central business. Central business is its own thing, right? And then you have parking everywhere else. So this would not necessarily adjust the central business district because there is already not a requirement for off-street parking
Okay.
in that area. This mainly, and you'll see there's a couple other places within where we're making the adjustments because their parking is different than standard off-street parking code for the rest of the city. So like in our FIB zone, it's a little bit different. In our normal hill heritage, our normal hill zones, their off-street parking is a little bit different. So it doesn't affect those areas in the same manner that it affects the entire rest of the city for off-street parking requirements. And this is the other thing to keep in mind is this doesn't mean that an existing business suddenly doesn't have to have this parking. It's for businesses moving into new buildings, businesses building new buildings, a change of use in a building. So say, Kmart's not a great example, but I'm going to use Kmart. Say a business came in and they wanted to revitalize the Kmart building, but they were going to do a use other than its previous commercial retail use, and say it was something that was much more dense in use and had a higher parking requirement for off-street parking. So we run into situations where businesses will want to come in and they'll want to go into a business that had some, occupancy A. And so occupancy A required so many parking spaces. And so that building was built to that occupancy type and provided that many parking spaces based on that occupancy type and the square footage. And then that business goes out or goes somewhere else, right? So a new business comes in and say this new business is occupancy B. And occupancy B requires more parking for that same square footage. The way the parking code is currently written, we would struggle to get the business with occupancy B into that occupancy A building because they wouldn't have enough parking based on how the code is currently. So the hope is that by reducing that required amount of parking, that you will see the reuse of buildings, and that instead of them just sitting empty and people building new buildings because they can't find a building that has enough parking and building space for them, that they'll be able to utilize existing buildings because we can make the parking situation work for them.
How do you make the parking situation work for them?
Because less parking would be required. So say you have a building that has 10 spaces.
Right.
And so, and for the business that was in there, 10 spaces met what the occupancy classification and square footage required. So you'll see in current code for business and professional offices, it's one space per 250 square feet, right? So if you have a 1,000 square foot building, you need 4 spaces. So you have a building, you have 4 spaces. So say you have a restaurant. A restaurant's a much higher density. Say if a restaurant wants to go into a building and they want to put in more seats. And so then they have 20 seats and you need more parking than what was required for that 1 to 200. The 4 spaces that they have wouldn't meet the code. So we would probably discourage them from going into that building because there wouldn't be enough parking to cover their employees and the number required. And in some instances, the number that's required it's padded a little bit, right? It's trying to prevent there being problems, but a lot of times it ends up being much more parking than probably is necessary, like the Kmart parking lot.
Okay. And this is going to 50%?
Yeah, what the current requirements are. So rather, the committee thought it was a better idea to do kind of a blanket rather than to go through every single occupancy type you might have and come up with a new number that was appropriate. That would require a lot of extra work for both staff, the committee, planning and zoning.
Counselor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you, Mayor. So, in listening to the public comments, so this situation doesn't help his situation.
No, because,
It doesn't add more parking on the street.
no, I don't know how you would add more parking on the street. I mean, streets are,
Well, what I'm saying is
This
he
is
was
specific to
requesting parking
off-street
for
parking.
people, the tenants, you know,
Yes.
and this wouldn't allow it. This is actually reducing the home, or the business owner's requirement to have more parking.
so in Mr. Tucker's specific example, that downtown corridor has different rules than the rest of Lewiston. So no, it would not help the current situation that they are experiencing with the dorms.
Counselors, further questions?
I just have,
Counselor Forsman?
Businesses that have turned down empty vacant buildings in the past due to the restrictions. Or currently have.
Yes, that was definitely a consideration that we made.
Counselor?
Eliminating the amount of space. For rooms in an apartment building, you need to have maybe 4 spaces.
So currently for multifamily, so like an apartment, that's based on units, not on bedrooms. Our code does not consider bedrooms for multifamily.
During businesses, as I'm understanding, is the overall square footage, then equals how much parking is needing.
Not for multifamily. Multifamily is just by units. So like, if you had a unit that was a studio apartment and was 500 square foot, it would require the same amount of parking that a unit that is 1,500 square feet and 3 bedrooms would require. They are considered the same currently under the code. So for multifamily, it does not take into account the size or the number of bedrooms. It's just by unit. Yes, it would also cover that. It would cover all the uses that are currently listed in the off-street parking section of Chapter 37.
Counselors, further questions? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you, Katie. Counselors, next we have item B, first reading of ordinance 4939, amending Lewiston City Code, sections 37-93F and 37-145, related to off-street parking requirements and allowances in the form and impact-based FIB zone, amending Lewiston City Code, section 37-149, relating to the minimum and maximum parking requirements based on land use. This is an action item. Our Assistant City Planner, Ms. Katie Hollinghead, is with us if you have questions. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion. Councilor Schroeder,
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4939.
it's been moved by Councilor Schroeder, seconded by Councilor Klein, to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4939. Is there any discussion or amendments? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Clerk Brockie?
Approving the first reading of ordinance 4939, an ordinance of the city of Lewiston amending Lewiston City Code sections 37-93.f and 37-145 related to off-street parking requirements and allowances in the form and impact-based FID zone, amending Lewiston City Code section 37-149 relating to the minimum and maximum parking requirements based on land use and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Clerk Brockie. Councilors, next up, we have item C, public hearing for ZA-04-2024, accepting testimony on zoning code amendment ZA-04-24, which proposes amendments to Lewiston City Code Section 37-33 relating to standards for small lot development or zero lot line development. This is an action item, and again, we have our Assistant City Planner, Ms. Katie Hollingshead, with us. Again, I will open the public hearing. There'll be a staff presentation. We will accept any testimony from the public, and then I will close the public hearing. Prior to closing the public hearing, if you have questions, council, that would be the time to ask them. Once the public hearing is closed, additional evidence or testimony may not be received. So again, that would be your time to ask the questions. Also, if we have members of the public here to testify, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. So with that, Katie, I will open up the public hearing and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, I think Mr. Birdsell is getting my PowerPoint up and going. I believe you've been given copies of these slides. Okay. So this is the A-04-2024, a proposed amendment to our small lot development code, which is Lewiston City Code Section 3733. So we're going to do a little background for how we got there. So our small lot development code was introduced back in January of '06 via ordinance 4433. Small lot development is a development type along with much smaller lot sizes. And a couple of other things. So it is allowed by right in our R3 medium density residential zone, in our R4 higher density residential zone, and by conditional use permit in our R2 and R2A low density residential zones. So under that original ordinance, when it was introduced in '06, that allowed for a lot size of 4,000 square feet for a single family dwelling. For a two-family dwelling, minimum was 6,500 square feet, with a lot width of a minimum of 40 feet for an interior lot and 45 feet for a corner lot, and a lot depth of 80 feet. Setbacks are also a little bit different than in our standard residential zones. So a front yard could be a minimum of 10 feet or 25 feet from the center line of the adjacent street, whichever was greater. A side yard could be 0 feet, so that's called zero lot line development, where you have a common wall that acts as your lot line. Or 5 feet or more, except on corner lots where the side yard on the street side would be a minimum of 10 feet or 25 feet, again, from that center line of the adjacent street, whichever is greater. And then a rear yard would be a minimum of 20 feet, except if you had a side yard of at least 20 feet, and then your rear yard could be reduced to 10. Small lot development also allowed for 60% of your lot to be covered. In our low density residentials, it's 40%. And in the medium and higher residential, it's 50% currently. And then there were some standards that went along with that. So the standards are that you could have one detached garage of 440 square feet. And if a garage was not attached to your primary residence, you were not allowed to have any other accessory buildings, so no little sheds, no garden buildings, no other things. Vehicular access should be provided from the rear of the lot, like through an alley, when the structure is set back less than 20 feet from the front lot line. And that the parcel prior to being developed with small lot development project must have 160 continuous feet of frontage on a 50-foot or wider right-of-way, and that each small lot development must create a minimum of 4 contiguous lots. So this was the code in '06. Code was amended in December of '21 under ordinance 4838. This amendment came up because we had developers approach city planning saying, hey, we don't really like to use this, and we usually do planned unit developments to get what we want because the lot sizes and the dimensional standards don't work for us. So amendments were made to change those minimum lot dimensions to be more flexible, and we'll go through what that looks like now. Added clarity to what zero lot line construction was, increased the maximum size of a detached storage building, and allowed for additional smaller sheds, so you could get a Ziggy's building to, put your lawnmower in if you didn't have a garage. And then added 6 design standards to create desirable residential areas that allowed for flexibility of development while still being compatible in design and scale with the established housing around. A lot of times we see small development done as infill development. Both the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council held public hearings when this amendment was done in '21, and 0 public comment was provided. I went back and double checked both the videos and the minute recording. No public comment was received at all. So the intent of those amendments was to give developers the flexibility to not have to use the plan unit development process, which has 2 sets of public hearings, much like a rezone does, to achieve smaller lot size or reduction in other development standards. Having the design standards also provides certainty to our neighboring property owners about the limits of what would be allowed in those small lot developments. Small lot development is only achieved through a subdivision process, which does not require a public hearing. The lot standards are smaller than what is allowed in our R1, R2, R2A, R3, or even the R4 zoning districts. So I did some looking. So other jurisdictions that have small lot development identified in their zoning code are Boise and McCall. Both of those require design standards, and they either review those with a design committee or just city staff reviews. And then, because I looked at almost every city in the state of Idaho for whether or not they did small lot development, a list of jurisdictions that do not have small lot development identified in their zoning code, but do require design guidelines with either, like I said, a separate review by a design committee or city staff. So Sandpoint has design guidelines for all new residential construction. Post Falls requires design guidelines for twin homes or duplexes, townhomes, tiny homes, or cottage homes, new construction. Coeur d'Alene has design review for certain residential neighborhoods, and they have a series of overlay zones, and they require them there also. Eagle has design review in 4 of their overlay zones. Ketchum requires design review for detached or 4 or more attached townhomes. And then Pocatello has design guidelines for garages and landscape. They require a certain amount of grass for new single-family construction. Lewiston also has design guidelines in our West End Historic District, our Normal Hill Heritage Overlay Zone, the Bryden Canyon Special Planning Area A Zone, and our form and impact-based zoning districts. So, Council initiated a code amendment back in October after hearing from a local developer regarding the current design standards, design guidelines that are in small lot development. So that's those 6 that I said that got introduced in '21. Planning and Zoning Commission held meetings on November 11th and December 13th and discussed the proposed changes. They heard changes from both staff and from the developer. Planning and Zoning Commission further amended the proposal that was given to them by staff. They added some things, they took some things away. And they created a shopping list of 10 design items that a developer could choose 5 from to accomplish during the small lot development. So this amendment proposal was reviewed at a public hearing on January 8th. It received testimony against the amendment from that same local developer. And this is a change from the current requirement of 6 required design standards. They have to meet all 6 currently, to a choice of 5 out of that list of 10 options. So these are our list of 10. So the house facade shall have, that faces the right-of-way, will have a minimum of 15% window covering, and shall include at least 2 of the following design things for the facade that cover 20% of the length or the height of the facade. So a color change, a texture change, a building material change. So that could be that your siding goes one way and then it goes another way, or that you have like the stone on the bottom, or you have brick somewhere, some sort of change, right? And then an incorporation of a wall plane projection or recession. Number 2, that primary entrances to the home shall incorporate a covered front porch and a well-defined, improved, visible walkway to the front door, and a minimum of 3 of the following building articulation elements as part of the street-facing facade. Things like cornices, overhangs, bay windows, balconies, or other similar architectural features. Number 3, that house facades facing the street right-of-way shall not have an attached garage that exceeds 70% of the width of the facade of the building. And then for a home with an attached garage, the garage wall with the garage door shall be either recessed or extended at least 4 feet from the adjoining habitable space. So it either tucks back behind or goes forward at least 4 feet. Unless, of course, the garage is accessed from the rear, like we said before, if they did an alley in their development. All roofs shall be a hip, gable, or mansard roof with a minimum of 4/12 pitch with a 12-inch minimum eave. If it's a mansard roof, it should incorporate dormers equal to at least 25% of the facade of the roof area. Not a lot of places do mansard roofs anymore, but we did want to include that because we do have several townhome developments that do utilize that roof style. Then all parking shall be located in the rear with alley access. So again, that same idea that you would have your garage behind the house, with just the house sitting in the front. And that would be only if they developed with alleys. Then all homes shall have a minimum of 1 dormer. Then trees, each lot shall have a minimum of 1 tree planted by the developer with an automatic irrigation system in the front yard. And then for 0 lot line developments, those are the ones where they have that shared wall. Attached dwelling units that have attached garages, the common wall between the units shall separate the habitable space. So house to house rather than garage to garage. So that the garages are not adjoining. This option shall not be available for corner lots where the garages are adjoining, but each garage faces a different street. And then number 10, no more than 3 detached homes or 4 attached 0 lot line homes in succession shall share the same visual building design. Homes shall differ in at least 2 of the following 4 aspects to ensure a clear visual distinction. This was one that the commission wanted to add. We have several condo developments up along like Stewart and our flower streets, Magnolia, Cypress, those ones, where they all look the same for blocks and blocks and blocks. And the commission thought it was a good idea to have some sort of difference because these are done in a subdivision, right? There's usually multiple of them in things. So a developer would pick 5 of these, of the 10 to do with each of their developments. Then some photos. Photos are always good. So this is an example of some of those different design architectural elements. So gives you an example of what an eave looks like, what a bracket looks like, what a transom window looks like, what a front gabled roof looks like, a portico or an entry porch, a sashed window, what dormers are. So they're little architectural windows that kind of pop out. There are lots of different ways to do dormers. They don't necessarily have to be any of these. And then again, some porch examples, full facade porch, an entry porch, a partial porch, which, the side of the house, that kind of deal. And so then this is not a small lot development house, but I wanted to use this photo. This was one of the photos that was given to the Planning and Zoning Commission when I did my presentation to them. So this is a home that has 68.22% of the facade is the garage. So one of those items was less than 70%. So this is almost maxing that out. And then you'll also notice the front door is not on the front of the house. The front door is on the side of each side. And this is a 0 lot line home. So the adjoining wall is in between those 2 garages, the house into 2 pieces. And their front door is kind of around the corner. So just an example of what that looks like, really. Okay, and that's presentation. I will stand for questions.
Counselors, do you have any quick questions? Otherwise, I'm going to see if we have anyone here from the public who would like to provide testimony. quick clarifying question?
Maybe after the testimony. That's okay.
Katie, let's see if we have anyone from the public that would like to speak tonight. If so, please come up to the microphone and introduce yourself for the record. And I would normally limit you to 3 minutes, but I'm going to give you 5 to 6 minutes tonight because we don't have a large crowd. And
Thank you. I'll try to be brief.
please
So,
introduce yourself first. Thank you.
Dan Young, Lewiston. I'm the developer that was referenced in all of those meetings that took place through planning and zoning. So I did some digging on why was it okay from 2006 until 2021. And the conclusion that I got was we don't like the look of houses that are dominant with garage. So the city staff changed the code to say that your garage has to be recessed 4 feet behind the front of your house. So that is what the code one of the code changes that took place in 2021. So the goal was to get rid of this garage dominant look. So the snout house with the garage sticking out front. Well, when you change it and you push the garage back, now it turns it into this linear kind of barracks looking house. Is that house that was on there, is that approved? Like, does that meet standard?
It's not a small lot development house, so,
But if it was, would it meet it? It doesn't have the right stuff?
yeah.
Can you put that picture back up there? So my contention as a developer and somebody that's built a couple hundred houses in the city of Lewiston, I now have to go through 10 items and pick apart these 10 items that the city has decided is a good idea for me to incorporate into my houses so they'll look nice and people will want to live in them. And my contention is, why get in the weeds with these 10 things? And I can meet 5 of the 10 building the plan that I want to build. So long story short, I hope this gets approved. But when it's approved, I would like to loop back and get rid of the whole thing. It just doesn't make sense, in my opinion. So you got somebody that wants to build a house and they have to come in and pick those things apart. So, okay, I got number 3 and number 6, but I'm not going to be able to do number 2. And now staff has to take the time to go through that with the individual to try to figure out, and there's some gray stuff in there. I mean, if you reread it, it's confusing. It's hard to understand. And the goal is to simplify. But my question is, what's wrong with that house? So they're building those houses. Those units have sold. They're occupied by members of our community, but it wouldn't meet the small lot subdivision standards. Who cares? That's a great looking house, in my opinion. If somebody wants to buy it and live in it, let them buy it and live in it. But why should the council and staff pick 10 things that have to be a part of somebody's house? It doesn't make sense, in my opinion. That's it.
Thank you, Dan. Councilors, do you have questions for Mr. Young or Ms. Hollingshead? Councilor Forsman?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out in the code where because like for plans, like being
So when it was introduced, smaller development, it was not being used. People would go through the planned unit development process to get the smaller lot sizes or other exceptions that they wanted. And planned unit developments are a contract between the developer and the city. And there's usually some give or take. So a lot of times in planned unit developments, you see design guidelines, or you see things like trees, or you see these sorts of things in there as kind of the caveats for them having a smaller lot size or reduced setbacks or whatever it is that they contractually agreed to and negotiated with the city. So when we were approached by developers saying, yeah, we don't like to use small lot development because it's not flexible enough. Staff floated the idea to the Planning and Zoning Commission that, hey, if we're doing these tiny lots and we're giving all these other things that are trying to make it more flexible, having your dimensions be, you could do either or standard zones, there's minimums, right? The commission thought that it was a good idea to put design standards in so that it would create kind of that cohesive feel to the neighborhood, much like you see in the Normal Hill area where the lots are much, much smaller, because that's the other thing to keep in mind. The lots are smaller than what is allowed in any of our zones. Even our high-density residential zone does not allow this small of a lot, which is 4,000 square feet. So I think the commission's thought was that kind of mediated those much smaller lot sizes and having a much denser population of homes, and just wanting to kind of buffer that for the surrounding neighborhood.
Yeah, I kind of.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Wright?
Yes, yeah, so when I was looking over the proposed amendment or change to this ordinance, under standards, that first number isn't down in the pick 10 different things. So this one detached garage, carport, or storage building shall be allowed, et cetera.
Yeah, that's just the last.
That's just on its own,
Yep.
has to meet that standard. Okay. And then it goes into the 10, which there's some more listed in the change that's being asked for, because there's only,
There were 6 in the original code.
yeah, 6 in the original.
Yep, and so we're changing it to 5 out of the list of 10.
Gotcha.
That is the proposal that Planning and Zoning has sent to you.
Okay. And I'm just curious about the decision process or the thought process, because I do see this seems to make it, at least for me, and I'm not even a developer, it makes it more confusing for me just to follow it. So what was the thought process around pick 5 things out of the 10 instead of just striking off all the things that,
You know, I
Aren't
can't
important.
speak to what the other body of 7 people, they did have, I included the minutes, and has some of their discussion. Mr. Young did present to them, and it did kind of just strike a majority of the things, and then staff presented them with kind of the list idea, the shopping list, and they didn't like what Mr. Young had presented. They didn't think that was the correct way to go. And then they specifically asked staff to add more items so that there would be a longer list to pick from. They thought that, I'm guessing, my thought is during those discussions that they agreed that that gives a better neighborhood look and kind of ensures that surrounding neighbors who are having this infill development come into, land that was open before and is probably much, much denser than the surrounding neighborhood, and kind of gives them some reassurance of what that's going to look like.
Counselor Klein?
Would it be possible to reduce it?
I think that's a question for legal.
Jennifer Tangano, City Attorney. It would be possible to change what's being proposed in front of you. You could do that through an amendment prior to a final vote on this first reading. You could change it at any point prior to it being adopted. The exact process is going to be dependent on when you want to do it and what kind of change you want to do.
Counselor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question for Mr. Young. If you- On this, you mentioned in here, you just assume see this go away. I really don't see it happening, but what do you think would be a reasonable expectation on the selections as Counselor Klein?
Well, 3 is easier than 5 and 2 is easier than 3. So
Yeah.
for sure. I just think that the market should drive what gets built. If you build junk, people are not going to live in it. So you got to have some street appeal. And cost is obviously a driver because it's going to cost extra money to do some of those things that are on that list. And if we're trying to keep housing affordable, that's just one more challenge to make it more affordable because now it has to be dressed up. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but
Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
okay.
Mr. Young, can I ask you a question too? I want to make sure that I heard you right, please. You made a comment in your testimony about approving these tonight?
Yeah, so I've been trying, so I finished a subdivision and I went through the small lot subdivision to do it. And I had the whole plan laid out. I've already built a bunch of them over in Clarkston, so we just use the exact same floor plan. So we platted it, got it approved, built the subdivision, and then submitted for permit, and I didn't realize the code had been changed. So the floor plan that I wanted to build, that I designed the subdivision for, was no longer allowed because of that ordinance that required the garage had to be recessed behind the front of the house. So I've been working since September to find an alternative, and it's been challenging to say the least. I've lost some sales and it's cost me some money waiting from September until now. So if this gets approved the way it's written with 5 of 10, and I don't know how long it takes to read them or how many council meetings that takes, but then I can submit for permit and go build the floor plan that I want to build. So that's why I said, if we have to do it that way, I mean, that's the lesser of all evils, I guess, rather than trying to delay or postpone or revamp it again.
Fair enough, thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor, as a point of clarification, Jennifer Tangano, City Attorney, Mr. Young did testify before that this ordinance did not change in the middle of the subdivision, but it was existing prior to his application for subdivision. It just was not incorporated into his planning process.
Councilors, further questions? Councilor Forsman?
I personally don't see the value in the garage restriction. If someone chooses to live in a house that has a look like that, and it doesn't bother them, I don't really understand the restriction. Not at all.
Thank you, Councilor.
So as a point of clarification, the garage is either that it's recessed or goes in front of. So that was changed from how it currently stands. So it can go in front of the house.
Excuse me, Mayor, Jennifer Tangano, City Attorney. Can Counselor Forsman please specify which garage provision? Because there's multiple garage provisions that are a part of these design standards.
So there's the one where the percentage of total facade. And then there's the one it's either recessed or goes in front of. So, and let me get to that. Okay, so number 3 is the house facade fronting the street right away. Shall not have a attached garage that exceeds 70% of the width of the facade. And then number 4 is for a home with an attached garage, the garage wall with the garage door shall be either recessed or extended at least 4 feet from the adjoining habitable space wall of the home.
And then there's also number 9 too.
Yes, and then number 9 is if it's an attached, that the garages don't touch, the habitable space touches instead.
Maybe if it, maybe. Or the, make the issue.
I think the commission just thought having more of those different design options available was better. So like the picture I'd shown has the garages, side by side. The attached homes that Mr. Young wants to build has the garages on the edges, not side by side. So he has his living space in the middle and the garages on the outside.
What would be the risk if we just didn't have those, any options?
What do you mean decide then? I mean, if we took out all those options, then those just wouldn't be requirements.
Bring that to get approval, correct?
For their building permits, yes. But if you don't have code in place, you can't tell someone no if like there's not a rule about it. So I guess what I'm saying is you can't decide like at the time of building permit submission that you like how it looks or not. Like that's not a fair way for staff to have to review things. I think Mr. Young would agree with me on that one.
Yeah, more, just trying to envision what scenario would be a big deal if we just didn't have that as a requirement at all. I think if there would be repercussions by not having it.
I mean, I guess it depends on if the council decides to reduce the number of required items to be less than that 5. Because if you're going to remove 3 of the 10, I feel like that might make it harder to 5, because then you only have 7 left. So I guess it kind of depends on what the council wants to do.
Jennifer, did you have a comment for us?
Jennifer Tangano, City Attorney, to kind of back what Assistant Planner Hollings had saying is that if we don't have any standards in place, then the city can't govern how the developments are proceeding as far as the design aspects. The reason why they're generally in place is not necessarily for safety purposes or health and welfare, but primarily for aesthetic purposes, to protect the property values of the neighborhoods where those developments are going through, and to ensure continuity of design standards for the city as a whole. If there are no specific regulations, then developers can put any type of design that they wish, whether it fits with the neighborhood or not. That's primarily the main advantage for a city to incorporate such design standards, is to control aesthetically the continuing development of the city and not have, clashing designs next to or in similar neighborhoods. So if you have older construction that has a particular design and then a completely different design right next door, that's primarily why those go through. It also helps protect community design, ensuring a variety of factors like walkability, incorporating vegetation, and ensuring, just different aspects that are otherwise not necessarily a part of construction, but more, again, aesthetics and design get incorporated for future developments as well. So even something as simple as, requiring the trees for certain developments ensures that there's not just asphalt and concrete in particular developments. It ensures that there's greenery and vegetation for the future.
Counselor Klein?
I've got a question.
Katie, so if we reduced it from 5 to 2, would the house that's on the last page be acceptable?
It would depend on which two, oh, the
Like
two in
two
general?
different- Two different.
I would have to go back and look through it, but I think so.
Counselor Klein?
I mean, I think the only one that one doesn't really is it doesn't have, its entrance is not on the front of the house because it's on the side. And so the ones that talk about that and the ones that talk about having a porch, like it wouldn't meet those ones, obviously. But it is less than the 70% of total facade. I don't know if it meets the 15% of window. Off the top of my head, I don't know how big that window that's shown is.
There's two tones. I don't know how much glass it requires.
So maybe, I mean, I didn't go through that particular house. It's not a small development home. That one is in a planned unit development.
Counselor Klein?
So Jennifer, if we were to change it from 5 to 2, would it be changing, section 37-33? 5 to 2 out of the 10 requirements listed?
Jennifer Tangano, City Attorney. So yes, it would be changing Lewiston City Code, proposed Lewiston City Code, section 37-33E. If you're just changing it to read, all homes within a small lot or zero lot line development shall comply with a minimum of 2 out of the 10 requirements listed below.
Counselor Wright?
Yeah, just based on the urgency that I'm hearing from our public, this makes sense to move forward with, maybe a reduced number or something like that, but it does seem like something that we should probably take a deeper look at some point. Thoughts on it at the moment?
Okay, counselors, we're still in the public hearing phase on GA-04-2024. Have more questions for Ms. Hollingshead, Mr. Young, or for our city attorney, Jennifer Tangano? Counselor Schroeder?
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Young, you don't have to get up probably, but if they reduce that down to 2 choices, would that meet your needs?
Well, like I said,
Please introduce yourself each time. Thank you.
Dan Young, Lewiston. I can meet 5 of the 10 right now,
That's what I thought.
but it's going to be challenging to meet the 5 of 10, and it's going to cost me more money. So one of the requirements, so you can't have more than 15% glass on your house. That's one of the requirements when you submit for permit. You have to do the glazing area. And if it's greater than 15%, you have to shrink your windows. You have to make an adjustment somehow for the energy code. Well, one of the things that's in there is you have to have more than 15% glass on the front facade of your house. So the requirement that's in the code is contrary to the code that says you have to have less than 15% glazing area. So just big picture, I think the whole thing is confusing and frustrating and going to be costly. And I think it's going to be hard for the staff to enforce because there's some gray area in there. And you're going to get contentious people arguing about what the facade is and what a texture change is. And it looks like trouble to me. But less is better, I guess, if that answers your question.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further questions for either Ms. Hollingshead or Mr. Young, okay, I'll close the public hearing. Thank you. Next up, we have item D, first reading of ordinance number 4935, amending Lewiston City Code Section 37-33 relating to design standards applicable to small lot and zero lot line small developments. This is an action item, and again, we have our Assistant City Planner, Katie Hollingshead, here. Councilors? Council President Kleberg.
Make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance 4935.
Second.
Been moved by Council President Kleberg, seconded by Councilor Speckelmark to approve first reading of ordinance number 4935. Is there discussion or amendments? Council President Kleberg.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I would actually make a motion to amend 4935 and reduce the amount of design standards down to 2 out of a possible 10.
Been moved by Council President Kleberg, seconded by Councilor Forsman to amend City Ordinance number 4935, Section 37-33, Sub E standards to all homes within a small or zero lot line development shall comply with a minimum of 2 out of 10 requirements listed below. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, councilors. Clerk Rocky?
We need to, we still have the motion to approve the first
The
reading.
original motion still up.
We sure do, don't we?
Yeah.
Been moved by Councilor Kleberg, seconded by Councilor Speckelmeyer to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4935 as amended. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, councilors. Thank you, Clerk Rocky. Clerk Rocky.
Approving the first reading of ordinance 4935, an ordinance of the City of Lewiston amending Lewiston City Code Section 37-33 relating to design standards applicable to small lot and zero lot line small lot developments and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Councilors, next we move to Roman numeral 5, consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these issues unless the councilor so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered on the active agenda under items moved from the consent agenda. Councilor Klein?
Motion to approve consent agenda?
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Klein, seconded by Councilor Schroeder to approve the consent agenda. Clerk Rocky?
Council President Kleberg,
Aye.
Councilor Wright,
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder,
Aye.
Councilor Klein,
Aye.
Councilor Spickelmeyer,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman.
Motion carries. Thank you, council. Next, we move to Roman numeral 6, active agenda. Item A, advisory board and commission appointments. Action item, Code Board of Appeals, considering the appointment of Michelle Rademacher and Kevin Messick to a 3-year term. And I'm going to do this in one motion. I move to approve the appointment of Michelle Rademacher and Kevin Messick to a 3-year term on the Code Board of Appeals.
Second.
It's been moved by the mayor, seconded by Councilor Schroeder to approve the appointment of Michelle Rademacher and Kevin Messick to a 3-year term on the Code Board of Appeals. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Councilors, next up, we have Cemetery and Urban Forestry Commission, Advisory Commission, considering the appointment of Shirley Phillips to a 3-year term. I move to appoint Shirley Phillips to a 3-year term on the Cemetery and Urban Forestry Advisory Commission.
Second.
It's been moved by the mayor, seconded by Council President Kleber to approve the appointment of Shirley Phillips to a 3-year term on the Cemetery and Urban Forestry Advisory Commission. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We got the 2/3 present. Next, we have active agenda item B, resolution 2025-3, considering authorizing the destruction of certain human resources department records. This is an action item. Councilors? Here. Councilor Spicklemeyer?
Motion to approve resolution 2025-3.
It's been moved by Councilor Spicklemeyer, seconded by Councilor Wright to approve resolution 2025-3. Clerk Brockie?
Council President Kleber,
Aye.
Councilor Wright,
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder,
Aye.
Councilor Klein,
Aye.
Councilor Spiegelmeier,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman.
Thank you, councilors. Next, under active agenda, we have item C, ratification of the decision on reconsideration of ZNC 24-4 and reintroduction of ordinance 4932, ratifying and reapproving the decision on reconsideration of ZNC 24-4 and reintroducing ordinance 4932. This is an action item, and we have our city attorney, Jennifer Tangano, with us tonight.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Jennifer Tangano, City Attorney. This matter is coming before you again because during the January 27, 2025 City Council meeting, Councilor Schroeder made the motion to approve the decision on reconsideration of ZNC 24-4. However, she had previously recused herself from that matter because she has a conflict of interest, and it was that she previously disclosed. She had noticed and mentioned that it was worded differently than it has in the past on prior city council agendas, and she didn't realize the mistake until immediately after the item. She took steps after the meeting to notify the mayor and the city clerk about the issue. And as a result of her participation on it as a conflicted city councilor, the action is nullified and voided as if it never happened. So tonight you're being asked to ratify and reapprove your decision on reconsideration of ZNC 24-4 without Councilor Schroeder's participation. Additionally, because the underlying action that introduced ordinance number 4932 was voided due to Councilor Schroeder's participation, you're also being asked to reintroduce and redo the first reading of ordinance 4932 following your approval of the decision on reconsideration. Questions if there are any?
Councilors, any questions for Jennifer Tangano? Questions? Thank you, Jennifer. Councilors, number 1, decision on reconsideration of CNC 24-4, considering approval of the decision on reconsideration of CNC 24-4.
Mayor,
Councilor Klein,
motion to ratify and reapprove the decision on reconsideration of ZNC 24-4.
Second.
been moved by Councilor Klein, seconded by Councilor Wright to ratify and reapprove the decision on reconsideration of ZNC 24-4. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Councilors, one nice thing about this is we get to learn about the process, the parliamentary process on this. I appreciate that very much. Number 2, first reading of ordinance 4932, considering implementing the city council's decision in CNC 24-4, declaring that certain real property be removed from the community commercial C3 zone to the medium density residential R3 zone, and amending the official zoning map of the city of Lewiston. This is an action item. Councilor Klein,
Motion to reintroduce the first reading of ordinance number 4932.
Second.
been moved by Councilor Klein, seconded by Council President Kleber to reintroduce the first reading of ordinance number 4932. Is there further discussion or amendments? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Clerk Brockie,
Approving the first reading of ordinance 4932. an ordinance of the City of Lewiston implementing the City Council's decision in ZNC 24-4, declaring that certain real property be removed from the community commercial C3 zone to the medium-density residential R3 zone, amending the official zoning map of the City of Lewiston and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Clerk Brockett. Under the active agenda, item D, ordinances. Number 1, second and third readings. A, ordinance 4938, concerning amending Lewiston City Code Section 35-81, Sub 1, relating to the service of a parking violation notice. This is an action item.
Mayor,
Councilor Spickmeyer.
motion to combine the second and third readings and waive the third reading in full of the ordinance number 4938.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Spickmeyer, seconded by Council President Kleber to combine the second and third readings and waive the third reading in full of ordinance number 4938. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Motion carries. Councilor Spickmeyer.
Motion to approve the second and third readings of ordinance number 4938.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Spickmeyer, seconded by Councilor Wright to approve the second and third readings of ordinance number 4938. Is there any discussion or amendments? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? It carries. Thank you, Council. Clerk Brockett.
Approving the second and third readings of ordinance 4938, an ordinance of the City of Lewiston amending Lewiston City Code Section 35-81, relating to the service of a parking violation notice and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Clerk Brockett. Councilors, next up we have under D, ordinance number 2, adoption approval of ordinance summaries. Item A, ordinance 4938. This is an action item.
Mayor,
Councilor Spickmeyer.
motion to adopt ordinance number 4938 and approve the related ordinance summary.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Spickmeyer, seconded by Councilor Schroeder, to adopt ordinance number 4938 and approve the related ordinance summary. Clerk Brockett.
Council President Kleber,
Aye.
Councilor Wright,
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder,
Aye.
Councilor Klein. Aye. Councilor Spickmeyer,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman.
Aye.
Thank you, councilors. We have no business under Roman numeral 7. Items moved from the consent agenda. We'll jump over to Roman numeral 8, unfinished and new business. Item A, city councilor comments. Comments shall not be related to an item currently before the city council or an item that may come before the city council in the foreseeable future, and shall be limited to comments, not discussion. Councilor Forsman.
What I wanted, excuse me, that I would not feel really my favor, and it just seems like the sickness. So, and stay safe and healthy and. The illness, and appreciate. Oh, and Dan, thank you for being and.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Wright.
Yes, this last week I continued to meet with the various department leaders in our city, and it's been a pleasure. And good job, Mayor, on having such great leaders.
Councilor, other council comments? No. Item B, city boards and commissions, liaison updates, commissioners, councilors. Councilor Wright? Councilor Wright?
Yeah, so we had the East 911 Joint Powers Board meeting, and we discussed the standards and best practices that their staff has learned going to a couple conferences. And one of the high points was the potential use of AI that's going to be coming about in the 911 system down the road. I don't have any date or anything on that, but that's the future coming at some point. Also discussing the, if I can find it here, a challenge that we have with being able to pinpoint where someone is when they're calling 911 was the example given. So if you're driving to Winchester or driving down to Boise and you break down at some point and you call 911, the routing may not get you to the place that's actually nearest you, and you would need to know where you are and tell the dispatcher where you're at to get the best service. And discussion on, how are we going to go about upgrading that system to a system that can tell where you're at, and working through that with the state. And finally, the equipment that services the 911, where is the best location for that equipment? And there was just some preliminary discussion on, is that police station or is that courthouse? And that's still being discussed, and they said that decision would need to be made somewhere midsummer to end of summer, an actual decision on where that equipment should go.
Exciting. Thank you. Counselors on this, Counselor Spickmeyer, Counselor Klein?
So cemetery, the last meeting I had with them, they wanted to express their concerns about our budget last year, or this year, and the lack of an urban forester. Wanted more information about the positions that we had to advertising for. And there will be some landscape code amendments being brought to the comprehensive plan development team.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay,
I have meetings coming up, but I don't have any to report on.
okay. Counselor Forsman?
On historic preservation, the planetary of quick minutes, Little Park Valley Chamber of Commerce, Liberty Theater Preservation Allowance, while I want to honor really and Walt Disney legacy of Park Lewiston, and will bridge history. It says here, Mayor Johnson, you have supported, I also support, and I hope the other councils also support having, creating a celebration of the 100th anniversary of the marriage of Lillian Allen to Walt Disney, which occurred on July 13th, 1975. On what that, but it's time when, I'm hoping to make it an annual thing, and there is more to come on it, but it's an exciting. Not a lot of story. So I encourage you to listen to on that. Beyond the emergency, Wednesday, they're going to be just going over code and fine-tuning it. I will be unable to attend due to a doctor's appointment, but I have full confidence that they will hammer it down and get that code for us to get done during the night.
Thank you, Counselor. Well, I'll throw a few comments out, and they're really, most of them are meant for council's benefit, not for the public's per se, but a couple of things. We have, coming up shortly, openings on our Compensation Review Committee. And for those of you that don't remember, we have a citizens committee that will review every 2 years. They're required to do that, compensation for council members and the mayor. So we'll be accepting applications for that. They'll have, I think, till May 1st, June 1st? June 1st, maybe? I think June 1st to get the recommendations back to the council. So we'll start soliciting for that soon. Also, we have an opening on the URA board that we need to fill. So if you know of a good candidate, please get them to talk to. Katie's gone, but Tanya can help with that too. Parks and Rec Director, we are actively pursuing that. We have several applications that we are reviewing currently, so that's looking promising. We're going to continue to move down that road of getting a new director and then starting to put some of those items back together for Parks and Rec. And that'll bleed over into cemetery and forestry. Also want to tell you, the city of Lewiston here, let's see, this week, by the end of this week, will submit an application, a grant application to the Blue Cross Foundation in Boise. And we're going to be asking them for funding to put in a small picnic shelter and maybe a couple of other smaller amenities over there adjacent to where the Youth Resource Center is going to go in. So it's that big green space there along Main Street and the highway there. So we have tentative approval from the Idaho Transportation Department. We've gathered support letters from residents in the area, such as Linda Klein, if you remember, she was actively involved in that. And ITD wrote us one, some other community members, but I'm very hopeful that Blue Cross Foundation will look favorably on our application. I think it'll be a nice improvement to the community in a lot of ways. It'll become a place where we'll ask some of the youth from that resource center to adopt that park and do some work and help with other volunteer and community type stuff. So I'm excited about that. And then tomorrow, myself and Director Johnson and Director Grow and Director Gordon, our finance director, are going to be going to Post Falls, driving up to Post Falls, and we'll be meeting with the mayor and the city administrator and department heads up there to just share some ideas and see what we can learn from each other and see if we can't capitalize on sharing some of our knowledge, about things such as development standards that we talked about tonight and other things. So this is our first attempt doing this, but it sounds very promising. So I'll let you know what we learned from that. Item D, agenda topics. Hearing none, we'll go to adjournment.
I move that we adjourn. Second.
It's been moved by Council President Kleberg, seconded by Councilor Schroeder to adjourn. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
You said.